all of a sudden something extremely tall, and it was jet black from head to toe, crossed the railroad tracks.
You know, I'd put out a recorder and it would record for 60 nights. That's how I recorded the Ohio howls that are on the BFRO.
So we are back in Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and today I am hunting, I guess not the remnants, but the origin point for this Helltown legend. So I've come in here before with Mark Matsky, and we hiked around until we found a spot that we believe was probably, you know, the origin point. It was an abandoned road. Middle of nowhere, and we had a weird incident happen back there as well. Basically, we were in the middle of nowhere on an abandoned road, and a truck showed up on an abandoned road that was blocked by big concrete barriers. We're not even sure where they came from or how they got back there, but there's a lot of odd places like that here. It's one of the reasons it's fun to explore the park, because you'll find a lot of structures and old roads that go nowhere, a lot of blocked off parts of the park. So that's what we're doing today. I'm in here trying to find the abandoned road.
What is it about the valley that keeps people coming back? Maybe it's the river that cuts through its heart, or the pristine forests that line the banks of that same river. Maybe it's the numerous trails that are carved across it that take hikers away from the mundane or stressful lives we all live outside of the park. Maybe it's riding on the scenic railway that runs through the park and into nearby Akron or Cleveland. Or maybe it's the mystery of what lurks beyond the shadows in one of the strangest national parks you're likely to come across. Cuyahoga Valley is beautiful, there's no doubt about it. The settlers that came into this part of the state back in the late 1700s would likely have seen the value in the land the park sits on today. With its steep cliffs and ridgelines and flat lands just waiting to be farmed, the valley would have likely seemed ripe for the picking, a veritable Canaan. It's likely this same reason that close to 200 years later, the National Park Service would stake their claim on this land. Although this time, it would be in the interest of preserving the wilderness rather than farming it. The Cuyahoga River has had its share of disasters over the years, mostly of the environmental variety. But that wouldn't make the river any less hospitable to the creatures that thrive off of its presence, and it certainly hasn't stopped researchers like Mark Maisel from theorizing that the river plays a major role in the presence of Sasquatch within the park. Maisel, Mark Matsky, and others believe that Bigfoot might wander into and out of the park undetected by the civilization that lurks outside its boundaries by following that same river. By following the numerous tributaries, creeks, and other waterways that wind their way through it, these creatures would have a nearly limitless number of corridors to travel along. Corridors that might also invite other animals that could serve as food for a hungry, opportunistic eater. A creature like this would certainly end up in odd places, such as near the railroad tracks that run near the Jate Trailhead. The area around the tracks in this part of the park is marshy and fed by waters from the Cuyahoga River, which stakes a major claim here. It's in this same place where Joe Keski had his intense encounter back in the summer of 1995.
It looked like there was a tree stump out there, but that tree stump just kind of like explodes up out of the water like this and just takes off and is just throwing like these roundhouse punches, and this thing is just running through the water. It's charging through the water, and you could see it was chest deep, and it is just charging through the water, and it's running And in like a split second, the three of us, we all take off and run.
4 years later, a hiker would have a similar encounter that sounds eerily similar to Joe's. Her sighting took place just over 200 yards from the exact location where Joe's occurred, in broad daylight. Unlike Joe, this witness wanted to remain anonymous.
99, your sighting?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was July 7th. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. It was like already 92 degrees outside. Very hot day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I was walking these railroad tracks, and when I got halfway down, there's like a covert going under the railroad tracks for the swamp. I was standing on that, and my two dogs were over in the bushes smelling, and all of a sudden something extremely tall, and it was jet black from head to toe, crossed the railroad tracks, and there's a trail down there, right where the woods start, and it came across that trail, and what stopped me was it completely stepped over the entire railroad track. And I'm just standing there, and I'm like, did I just see what I thought I saw?
Yeah.
And then I got kind of uneasy feeling, and I called my dogs back, and when I called my dogs back, it came back around the thicket, which was extremely tall. There's like some kind of grass or something there. It came back around, stooped down, and crouched down along the ground and was sitting there staring at me. And I just got out of there, and I ran right over here to the yellow houses and told one of the rangers what I just experienced, and him and some lady in there, they were sitting there laughing at me.
Yeah, I've heard that already. In fact, the other guy that had a sighting here had the same thing happen. And then they reported to, in that case, they reported it to the Sagamore Hills police. And they sent it to the Sagamore Hills Fire Department as a joke.
Yeah.
So it's apparently laughed off by most people. But what's weird is those people are also aware that there's a lot of these sightings to happen. What's also weird is you said the creature was black.
Jet black.
That's a real common description here in the park. You said real tall. Do you have an estimate of how tall?
7, 8 feet.
Okay.
Real tall and skinny.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any fur, and I was just thinking to myself, with it being as humid as it was that day, that it would just be weird for somebody to be all done up in the middle of nowhere just to put a prank on somebody.
Was it crouched down? So how far from here would it be that your sighting happened? How far down?
All the way down.
Okay,
to
so
where the woods start. There's an actual horse trail.
Okay.
I think.
So maybe, I don't know where that is. Can you estimate from here? Like yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, mile?
Maybe a quarter mile.
Quarter mile?
Yeah.
Okay. So right where it starts to get more wooded is where it happened. Was it, when you first saw it, go back to that. When you first saw it, did you immediately notice that it was jet black? Or was it glistening? Did it have no water or anything on it?
No.
Okay. Eye shine, did you see anything?
No, it was too far away.
Okay.
From where I was standing, it was probably 1,000 feet.
All right. Which side of the tracks was it on when you saw it?
It was on this side of the tracks, and then it went to the east and walked over, and then kept going on the trail that's right there.
Okay.
And then it came back around, and it stooped down and was watching me.
So by then it's on the other side of the tracks when it stoops down? Okay. Did you get the sense it was heading in that direction then?
Yeah.
Okay. And it just wanted to make sure you weren't following or something? Maybe?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't stick around. If I had somebody with me, I would have maybe, stuck around.
What did your dogs do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Didn't even pay attention to it.
Okay.
Which I'm kind of glad, because they were off leash.
Yeah.
No. And it took me like 7 years before I came down here again and went hiking.
Yeah, what was that like?
Just scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Really did.
How did it make you feel when you tried to report it to the park officials and they laughed it off?
I felt kind of funny, because they were acting like, I was out here smoking something.
Yeah.
And they were just like, no, you didn't, no. You probably seen somebody was just walking. And I was just like, no, they did. And then that was just the end of that. because I was kind of shooken up about it.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah.
Something about this witness account stood out to me. The witness description of a black Bigfoot harkened back to something Sonia Horstman had said about the large number of sightings in CVNP of a black-haired Bigfoot. Black hair isn't uncommon in Bigfoot reports, but typically in Ohio they're brown or a reddish or even tan brown. Black hair would make it easier to write off as a possible black bear, but the number of reports and the behavior of the creature makes a black bear unlikely.
And again, I'm nosy and I'm asking questions. I would take my son in the 90s, I would take him over to the ski lodge, and then, I'd hang out with guys, eat hot chocolate and hang out with all the adults. My son would be out there skiing, and of course I'd be asking the people who work there, any good Bigfoot stories? Any good Bigfoot stories? And they said yes, they've been seen at the edge where they have the snow machines blowing. They've been seen watching the snow machines. And the people who work there have actually seen it. Okay, so where's the pictures? Well, we're not allowed to have our phones. We're not we have like walkie-talkies. We're not allowed to have our phones. Nobody had phones. Like, was there any cameras? Well, the cameras are all on the resort. There's nothing on the side. I'm like, well, darn, because if every time you turn the snow machines on and they come out to watch it, maybe it's kind of an annual thing for them, like, let's go watch the snow machine.
Do you think,
again,
like
black
daytime or
Bigfoots?
nighttime when
Well, they do it during the day and night, I think, but they were seen. They were seen there. I'm pretty sure it was during the day, but they blow those snow machines all day, all night.
Yeah.
When the weather's just right.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
there's a ranger station over near the covered road bridge. There's a ranger station, and I know that the field between the ranger station and the bridge, there's a very large field there. And I know some people who were kicking around, and I'm not going to say their name, they were kicking around looking for arrowheads and stuff, and then looked up and there was something crossing through the field, and they got the heck out of there. I don't know. Again, it's a black Bigfoot. People are reporting this big black Bigfoot down here.
I was down by Everett Bridge, and there's a little creek.
It's right across the street from like Oak Hill Trailhead and all
Yes.
that. Yeah.
You go park in the parking lot for the bridge, go
Right.
across the bridge, and they took the road up.
Yeah.
If you
And that's
keep
been done not too long. Right?
Yeah. And you go kind of up the hill a little bit, following the old road, and you see a cabin back in the woods that's kind of fallen in and everything. I came down here in 2015 with a friend, and we were like, hey, let's go look at that cabin. So we just had a little bit of a snowstorm, and we decided to go back into the woods to get to the cabin, and he's looking at the cabin, and I walk in front of the cabin where the little creek is, and I just screamed out, oh my God. And he goes, what? And I go, there are footprints in the snow. And he goes, so? And I go, no, these are
Barefoot.
big barefoot, and they were in a straight line,
Yeah.
and they were about 6 feet apart. And he had an old flip phone, and he took pictures, and you could see the mid-tarsal break in the footprints. And we're standing on the snow, but we're not going down in it. There was like a crust on it,
Yeah.
and it went down the whole length of the creek.
Yeah.
Then it stopped, and in the creek there was a spot where you could see outline that there was a dead animal there. And you could see the outline of fur there.
Do you know what kind of animal?
Probably a deer.
Okay.
And then a foot over from that, there was a big long turd. And it looked like somebody took a bunch of silly putty
Yeah.
and made it into a string and wrapped it into the form of a turd. It was really weird. Then on the other side of Wheatley, there's a little park spot where you can go park on the side of Furnace Run. I was going back in there to do some ramp picking. I like to park there, and I take my dogs and walk in the creek.
Right.
And it was probably 2010. I just got this dog from the pound, my coonhound, And I had her for 2 days, and I'm like, I'm gonna go hiking with her and see how she is. So we went down in the creek, and we're walking way back in there, and I probably get maybe 500 feet back in there, and she puts her head down, and she starts growling really low. And I'm thinking, you know, she's just being weird, growling, I don't know what. My other dog, she was off leash, and she wasn't paying, she's sniffing and everything. And the dog keeps growling. And I walk, say, maybe another 10 feet, and then her growling started getting a lot louder. So then I kind of stopped. And there was a bend in the creek, and there was a bunch of brush that was really tall, thickets and everything. And I just kind of stopped, and I'm staring, and then all of a sudden she let out this huge bay that just echoed right there in the little valley that I was in. And I heard a big limb just snap right then and there. And I grabbed my dogs and got out of there.
How long have you been hiking or spending time in the park?
1999.
Okay. So you're familiar with it. Have you ever heard anything about other sightings?
I've heard that somebody captured a howl over by Kendall Lake.
Just in your time coming into the park, have you heard anything about the Helltown legends?
I have. I was always kind of fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And tried hiking in there to see some of the stuff, but I couldn't find any houses or anything over there. And I seen, you know, documentaries about people seeing things back in the woods over in there.
Right.
I've always been kind of fascinated by it and always wanted to go over there, but I didn't want to do it by myself.
The history of bizarre occurrences here in the park goes beyond enigmatic beings seen wandering the shadows near creeks and rivers. Over the years, numerous homicides, drug arrests, and accidental deaths have occurred here. It might seem odd, but as long as I can remember, there are stories about strange deaths in the park where the tallest elevations don't even reach 1,200 feet. Every year, someone is pulled from the river, either injured or dead due to accidents while kayaking or canoeing. There have even been missing persons cases, such as that of Hillary Sharma, who went into CVNP in August of 2014 and never returned. Her remains were later located that same month, and the medical examiner's office ruled it a suicide by hanging. The way in which the hanging occurred was odd, as her body was found in the river. She was said to have hung herself from a tree branch over the river, and eventually the branch broke, sending her lifeless body into the water below. Naturally, the internet did its thing, and within days there were stories circulating of a supposed video taken by Sharma as she ran from someone or something through the woods moments before her death. There's nothing to back this up other than internet rumors, something that the park is well acquainted with. The park's purported Helltown is a favorite of local ghost hunters and has been featured in numerous television shows. People recount seeing apparitions or hearing strange cries and calls for help in the night. These audible phenomena are also associated with Bigfoot, something that even a cursory Google search will turn up numerous returns of reports of odd howls and screams. Bigfoot researcher Charlie Page has been investigating in the park for quite a while. It's his investigation into a purported Bigfoot vocalization near Kendall Lake that alerted me to his work within the park over the years. The account in question was from a father and son who had been hiking near the lake in 2015 when they heard a scream that reminded them of the Ohio howl. Charlie has also recorded what he believes to be a Sasquatch vocalization in the park that has a very similar sound to it.
I don't know if you've seen or heard the Ohio howls that I recorded. They're on the BFRO webpage.
In Cuyahoga, I think I
Yeah,
have. I think
they
Mark
were-
just sent me one.
They were recorded, well, it's on the BFRO webpage. It's down in the lower left, and you gotta scroll down a bit, but Matt Moneymaker did a pretty nice write-up of the Cuyahoga Valley. And he did mention that it was near or on the Oak Hill Trail where the
Really?
sound was recorded. So that was in 2015 when I recorded that. And for like 3-4 years, you know, I put out a recorder, and it would record for 60 nights, you know, like roughly 8 to 9 hours a night.
You want to go this way?
Sure. Yeah, depending on, you know, the winter, the nights are longer, so I'd have it record like 9 hours from like 9 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Summer, obviously, you know, it's got more daylight, so I'd start it at, you know, like 10 o'clock
Yeah.
to like 6 a.m.
Okay.
And that's how I recorded the Ohio howls that are on the BFRO website. And so ever since then, for like 3 years straight, people were going down there, and I was recording all their calls that they would do. They would do knocks, they would do howls, they would do whoops. And so I was recording all that, and I could tell that there's like a couple squatchers that would go there regularly.
Yeah.
And then, so that area kind of became over-squatched, over-visited.
Really?
So I think
So you're saying though they were around 2015, and then after when did
yeah,
it?
like
Because this was when I
probably
was going. It would have
half
been
of
like
2015, 16, 17.
okay.
People were just going down there. So I think the Squatch kind of moved on and left that area. I don't want
Yeah.
to say left the area,
Yeah.
but just said, hey, you know, let's go someplace else.
Interesting.
So we've had, you know, I started Squatching. My first expedition was Pennsylvania BFRO in 2013, and I was hooked. And so I would go to Oak Hill because it was, for me, it was, I don't want to say it was close, but it was easy to get on and off the freeway and get there.
Yeah.
And so I would go there.
What led to the howls you recorded, the like Ohio howl?
The Ohio howl was recorded in March of 2015.
Okay.
And at the time, you know, my former brother-in-law, I think you know him, Dave Bevere, him and I used to go squatching all the time.
That's cool.
And, you know, this was actually, you could call this beginner's luck, because this is the first recorder I have ever put out for any type of duration in the Cuyahoga Valley. And, you know, I recorded the howls, and yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't get to regularly reviewing the audio until, you know, like that summer. It was like July or August, I think. I sent him to Monongahela. Are you familiar with him? He analyzes a lot of audio for the BFRO and for other people. And he's like, this is great. and he sent it to Matt Moneymaker, and Matt loved it, and he wrote up this whole thing on the BFRO website. And since then, after that came out, that's when things started to kind of quiet down at Oak Hill. I had to find other spots.
Calls in the park, it seems like there's vocalizations that people,
Sure.
which kind of runs counter to my theory, which is these things don't vocalize in areas where there's, denser populations nearby. And it seems like here there's dense populations nearby.
Yeah, but when you're in the park and it's easy to get away. I mean, I showed you where I lived up the condominium back. It was what? Off my deck, I was listening to the one, I think it was the same one as this one. No, it was 11 because it was the same time.
Was it like the Ohio howl type thing? Or?
Some, and then they had the long moan howl too.
Okay.
And right off my deck, I heard at least 3 times in 6 months. So we've had that, and I listened for, like I said, 6 months off my deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a friend who lives in the park here, real close to the park on Sagamore Road. And where he lives, there's a very large, big ditch, and then on the other side is a big ditch. And they hear a lot of howlings and a lot of screams and howls coming from that ditch. And he says there's times when the dog won't go out.
Yeah.
I'm like, you sure it's not the coyotes? He goes, no, it's the coyotes chime in afterwards. He goes, we can't identify it. That's something, we're not sure what's making those noises, but when the dog doesn't want to go out, we know there's something out there. He's the one that I need to get a digital recorder to. I need to get him a digital recorder and get him involved. And I need to say, put this digital recorder out every night, put it out there, and then, if you get something, hey, this is great. We can compare it to, other known voice recordings that we've gathered. I know there's some university has a collection somewhere.
Do you ever hear about anybody else having an encounter, like a direct encounter that someone told to you?
Yes, because I am a horsewoman. I own horses. I still do. And I've owned horses since I was 16, And hearing through the different barns and the different people, you would hear that people would have encounters down in Cuyahoga Valley. I'm like, well, where in Cuyahoga Valley? And they would say near the Frazee house, there is a little turnoff where people can park their trailers. And it's right there, that road leads up to the hospital there. But that area there, they said, is where they had been encountered a Bigfoot that screamed at them, and it scared the horses, and they never went back.
2014 to like 18. I would do that, go early in the morning. I'd probably go like 2 or 3 mornings a week. So I was there quite a bit. And I wouldn't just, I would go to other areas like Kendall Lake. There's a beautiful trail there. I would stop at the gas station and get 3 donuts. And there was this spot on the cross-country trail with an X. I mean, it's off the trail like about 50 feet, but I would always put donuts at the X. Every time I went there, I'd probably split my time like 1/3. I'd go one time to cross-country, one time to Oak Hill Plateau Trail, and then I'd kind of mix it up and do something else. And one time at the cross-country trail, I'll never forget, they had to be juveniles. I think there were 3 juveniles, but I was going through, there was one over here, one behind, and one in front, and they were all making noise. Type of shaking the trees a little bit, like they were happy to see me because I was bringing them donuts. And I don't know if that's, for sure what they were doing, but I know there was 3 of something, and they were all making noise.
The oldest on-record report within what is now CVNP comes from the mid-90s. It's Joe Kesky's encounter from the Jate Trailhead area. However, a number of people I've talked to recall hearing rumors and tall tales of massive man-like beings in the park as far back as the 70s and 80s. There was also a continuation of the grassman lore that alludes to the creature's presence in the park. The grassman is simply a local Akron area moniker for Bigfoot, and despite what television shows on major networks might say, the name does not have Native American roots. Prior to '95, however, there doesn't appear to be anything official online. Mark Maisel did tell me that in the 1980s, a Bigfoot was spotted crossing 271 near Peninsula, Ohio, a sighting I can't locate any additional information on. If you've had a sighting prior to '95 in the park, feel free to log it with a researcher near you, as this would be a big benefit to the ongoing search for answers. Regardless of when the sightings began, it's clear that the area is, and has been for some time, an ideal spot for Bigfoots to actually be encountered. The park's unique layout and the numerous public roads, houses, and villages in close proximity make it stand out in a state where the best-known research location is Salt Fork State Park, located in the middle of nowhere.
The interesting thing about CVNP to me is, so if you Google how many people reside within Cuyahoga Valley National Park, the answer is 0. They say there's 0. But we were driving here, and there's these interesting little pockets. I don't know if you've looked at your map as you're driving in, but what will happen is all of a sudden it's all green because it's national park, and then boom, right where this house is, there's this little white pocket that is like residential land or whatever.
Right.
So it's completely untrue to claim that there's nobody residing.
Right.
I mean, I guess technically they could say that, but the reality is there's many people living within the lands that the park sits upon.
Right.
Is how you would say it.
Yeah,
So there's
of course. And I
tons of
feel
people.
like Peninsula is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Peninsula
That's one of
builds
those little
its-
white spots.
It builds, it builds itself as sort of a gateway to the national park.
Yeah.
There's a store there that's the gift shop for the national park itself, and yet to say that it's not in the national park, I think it's bending a lot of linguistics to get into that situation.
Yeah, and what that says to me is it doesn't, I mean, I am very confused about Akron and Cleveland, but the fact that there are people residing within these same lands means that there are people residing here who can have encounters on their own property, the same type of encounters people are having in like Coshocton and Minerva, places we consider Bigfoot hotspots or whatever.
Yeah.
And you always say this, that you have to have two things to have a Bigfoot encounter. You have to have a Bigfoot in person. So this is the perfect place for
it. Really is. And when you take a look around, this is not old growth forest.
Right.
This is second growth, and yet, even right now, there's no leaves on the trees, but you can't see 100 yards away.
Yeah, the underbrush is so thick, yeah.
So the idea of something being concealed for the most part that wants to be elusive is completely plausible, as well as the people who are in here recreationally are typically going to stay on the improved trails. So if something even quite big is off of the trail, 50, 100 feet, staying still, the chances are they're not going to be noticed. Maybe if you're walking your dog might notice something. But again, that might be a witness encounter situation at that point.
Okay, so let's say do you believe that these things are migratory, or do you think they actually have kind of like they have a home range and they're within, the park is within their home range, or?
I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think, this is kind of a large area, and, I think they migrate. They have certain days within, like for example, when I was recording every night in Oak Hill, I knew like it was about every fourth night there was going to be some type of activity, whether it's knocks or like a whoop or something like that. And one of the coolest things I've ever recorded was, it was like 4 knocks, rock clacks in a row. And you could tell that one was very far in the distance. The second one was a little closer. The third one was even closer. And the fourth one sounded like they were just over there.
Okay.
So I think, you know, they stick around the area. They move from, like, you know, trail to trail. Speaking of the Cuyahoga Valley, you know, trail like areas.
Yeah.
They would move from trail to trail. And I think they have their favorite ones. And just like, you know, I have my favorite squatching ones.
Yeah.
But so that's I do think they do migrate within the area. I don't think I have no evidence to say that they go outside of this area. Even in the wintertime, you know, I've hiked here in the winter, and you know, I came across like footsteps in the snow, and these footsteps was like something huge was running, and you know, I don't know what it was.
How big?
I didn't really have anything to measure it with me, but the stride length, it was more than what I would do if I was running.
Right. Have you done any in CVNP?
Yeah.
Any that stand out?
There's one published report that was I did, and it was at the cross country trail. Somebody had found a footprint, they photographed it. So that's on the BFRO website. There's been other reports in the CVNP. Some of them are just crazy, you know, obviously hoax reports, but some of them are truly something that should be cataloged in the BFRO website.
I'm talking to two people later who've had experiences in the park and have found tracks. Both apparently are relatively close to a like a railway or railroad line. But I'm curious, have you heard about that kind of thing, like along the railway line specifically? And it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, it's you know, people often say like the power lines that cut through areas are like a Squatch highway.
Right.
I can't see any reason why the railway would be any different.
Yeah.
You know, if they're traversing from area to area within the park,
Right.
They could use that method as a shortcut. You know, for example, for cutting it from the towpath up to Oak Hill Plateau Trail, you would have to cross the tracks.
Okay, so you started telling me about an encounter you had.
Well, I've had a few things happen. You know, in the CVNP on the Oak Hill Plateau Trail. This was back in 2013-14. I saw one. You know, I happened to pick my head up as I was hiking because, you know, it was kind of during the early hours of the morning. You know, it was just starting to get light out. I happened to pick my head up, look over, and there was, you know, one hopping from behind one tree to behind another tree.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the stereotypical Bigfoot, you know, like had a big belly. The shape of it kind of looked like this from a distance, and you could just see it, you know, hopping from, you know, behind one tree to another tree. Couple things I can't really explain is when I first started, I had the world's crappiest headlamp. The red was basically can be used for like map reading.
Yeah.
It only went out for like 5 feet, and so I was hiking in the Oak Hill Plateau Trail, and there's this gravel part, and all of a sudden I heard this gravel crunch, and you know, like if something heavy is like stepping on something and it's crunching, this crunch didn't stop. I mean, it went on for like 2-3 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's not somebody like twisting, because you can kind of differentiate between the crunching versus like twisting of a foot.
Right.
But that crunch just went on and on for, you know, it would be more weight than if you or I would like step on gravel.
Right.
Another thing is I think there was something behind a large tree, and you know, again, this is when I was first starting out on the Oak Hill Plateau Trail. I walked by it and I could hear it shuffling like side by side, like it was trying to stay out of the field of view as I was going by. And I looked around and I couldn't see anything. And this was before I had my thermal and a decent headlamp. I would just go.
What time was this, you said?
This was early in the morning. This was before it was light out.
Before sunup, okay.
Yeah, they were both kind of, I want to say, closer to the winter time. I think it was following me.
Okay.
It was I don't want to say following me. It was shadowing me.
Okay.
Seeing what I was up to. That first one that jumped from tree to tree, that was shadowing me. This one, I don't know. Personally, I don't think really anything surprises a Bigfoot, because a Bigfoot knows you're there. So there's no use in trying to act stealth, because they know you're there. But I do think that it was trying to hide itself from me. And it was probably about that size of a tree, and I was probably about this far away as I was walking by.
Any eye shine or anything like that?
I've never experienced that. Honestly, I haven't. My former brother-in-law has. He says he observed eye shine. It was that same night that I put my recorder out, that I recorded the howls. He wanted to take a break, and so we found a log. He was sitting on the log, and I'm like, I'm going to walk down over in this area and see what I can see. And so we both had our radios with us, and he's like, Charlie, where are you at? And I'm like, well, I'm over here. Can't you see my headlight? And he's like, no, I can't see you. And then all of a sudden he saw like a red light over here, and I was down this way. And I called him on the radio. I said, Dave, I'm coming back. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I walked back up from this way, and he says, Charlie, I thought you were down this way, because he saw like something red glowing in the dark on that way.
Wow.
And I've heard other people have, seen eyesight or eye shine, eye glow.
The one you saw,
never
you didn't
experienced
see anything like that.
No. And it was early in the morning, so it was just about the time where you can start to see stuff, so you didn't really need a headlamp.
Right.
But the one that was hiding from me behind a tree, that was when I first started, and I didn't want to go back and find out if it was a Squatch or not. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna move along here.
Yeah.
I think, nowadays I've grown more accustomed to weird stuff happening, that I don't think I'd have a problem going back over. I mean, I would keep my distance, but I would still go back over there and see if I could see something, or try to play a game with it, or, something.
Yeah, so we found the road that we think is like the Helltown Road. It's just outside of the Boston Mills Visitor Center. The road keeps winding back up there, and I don't know, it was probably like 2018, 2019, Mark and myself, my son, who was only maybe a year or two old at the time, and then Mark's son, Andy, walked this road. And we did find an abandoned barn up there. And then, like I said, a truck came down this road. The area around here is interesting because it's kind of a swampy marshland on both sides, and the Cuyahoga River is right over there. What would have happened is when the national park started buying up land, they claimed eminent domain and then removed people from their homes, and there would have been some of those homes right in this spot. And then out of that grew this urban legend of Helltown. And Helltown is kind of a vague urban legend. There's little disparate stories about Helltown, different buildings that are haunted and things like that. Probably not a ton of historical accuracy in any of it, but it's still kind of cool to be here and track the origin spot for the legend.
The mysteries of this area are numerous. When I first started coming here in the early 2000s, I had no idea about the strange history of this place. Yet every time I'd set foot in the forests of the Cuyahoga Valley, there was an inescapable feeling that something was a little bit off. Yes, it's beautiful and peaceful, but somehow it didn't override my sense that there was an endless mystery to this place that might never be fully understood. It reminded me a bit of the land between the lakes in Kentucky and Tennessee, a place with a sad and chaotic past that had led to the birth of so many legends and so much lore that separating fact from fiction was essentially impossible. CVNP has its Sasquatch history, but also a history of missing people and murder, of towns that have dried up and vanished, stories of ghosts and ghouls haunting the abandoned buildings, and the remnants of the mills and warehouses that once stood here. Before European settlers moved into the area, it was inhabited by the Hopewell culture, who constructed what is known now as the Everett Mound, a massive crypt that was located in a park within the unincorporated village of Everett. Everett was home to nearly 200 residents and was once a bustling small town at the height of the canal era of the late 1800s. The land that the park resides on today was designated as a national recreation area in 1974, and the active land acquisition began in earnest shortly thereafter. Villages like Everett literally disappeared, with the government acquiring homes and businesses and either bulldozing, burning them to the ground, or preserving them as park offices or housing. Over 60,000 people moved from their homes and land. The bitterness many of them felt is still prevalent today. The legends of Helltown have taken on a life of their own. One of the most talked about stories is a supposed chemical spill that occurred after the town was evacuated, giving rise to rumors of mutated animals and even human residents. Add to that the Creeky Sea dump, a real site known for its toxic pollution, which only adds fuel to the fire. And then there's that eerie old school bus, half buried in the trees. Some say a family once lived there while waiting for repairs, while others insist the spirits of murdered children now haunt the rusted out frame. But it's not all chemical conspiracies and ghost stories. Some believe Helltown was home to a satanic cult, citing upside-down crosses on an old church, though in reality, that might just be part of the building's original design. Then there's the legend of the Witch of Helltown, an old woman often seen collecting herbs and mushrooms, thought by some to possess mystical powers. Strange lights, ghostly figures, and unexplained noises continue to draw curious visitors who buy into a host of false narratives to this day.
CVNP, one thing that Mark Maisel talked about that I haven't talked about too much, but I think we need to address it, is this Helltown stuff. How much have you looked into the Helltown story, and can you explain what the heck is Helltown?
Yeah, well, the whole thing with Helltown is, it is rooted in actual history. And it goes back to the time where ultimately in the 1970s, this place became a park, managed by the federal government.
Right.
And part of that was that there were people already living here, and eminent domain was utilized in order to vacate people from their homes, or at least grandfather them in until the time when they were done living there, and then it defaulted to the government to manage or not. And in the case of a lot of these homes, they just went vacant.
So Helltown is one of those urban legends that I started diving into to see what I could figure out what is going on. And I believe what happened is when they through the eminent domain, they took a lot of people's properties. And so all those people got together and had a meeting, and they decided that this one night they were going to burn all the buildings down. And they all did it. They said, well, heck, we're not going to let them just take our houses. We're going to burn everything down. One guy wrote, I now know how the American Indians feel. And that one night, a lot of these people who had their houses taken away, they all burned all their houses to the ground. And they had said that the devil came to town that night and burned the town down. It's not true. The people burned the houses down. And this makes sense, you know. They talk and talk and talk, and it all builds up into something like in your worst nightmare, and it's not true. It's not true. The truth lies within what the government did. The government took everybody's land away, and everybody was kicked out. So you'll see these documentaries on this Helltown phenomena, and one of them is about the slaughterhouse. And it's so dumb, because if you just look back in the record, you realize there wasn't any slaughterhouses down here. You can't put meat on the canal boats and it gets 7 days down. No. People around here back in the day, they slaughtered their own, and they had ice houses and kept their meats. They'd go down to the river, take big blocks of ice, pad them in sawdust and ice, and that's where they kept their meat. They didn't go to a slaughterhouse and somebody had somebody else do it. So the whole thing about the slaughterhouse is ridiculous. It really is. It's just made up.
Yeah, it's like one of those classic Ohio urban legends too. And then it gets put on TV, and all of a sudden.
And I think that's part of the legend comes from the fact that, you know, you come across a row of vacant houses out in a national park or a national forested area, and your imagination goes wild. And I think that is where all of the extra stories came into play.
Well, there were television shows too. There's been television shows, there's documentaries about Helltown, Ohio. I don't know what the urban legend version of it is, because I've never watched these shows.
Right, I don't either, to be completely candid, but I'm sure that they, you know, it's some combination of
Hell and town?
Hell in town, probably satanic activities, you know, rituals done in these old abandoned buildings, strange figures seen in the windows, any number of things. But there's nothing sinister about it, besides the fact that people couldn't live where they had lived for a long time.
Right.
And I think it's rooted in probably in that.
Well, even on this trail, far side over there, you know the Valley picnic area parking lot? If you go up that hill into the woods, you hike maybe a mile in, and you can just connect to it from here too, but there's an old abandoned house with a garage in the middle of nowhere in the woods. Did we ever do that?
No.
Did we ever go back there?
No, I'd be interested.
I was by myself hiking the trail one day, and I got off I hiked off the trail for some reason. And I was walking through the woods, and when I saw it, I actually gasped because it startled me. Because you did not, middle of the woods, just like this, middle of nowhere, and there's this abandoned house with a garage, and it didn't look, I mean, it was abandoned, obviously, but it wasn't like, there wasn't a tree growing through it or anything. So all throughout the park, there's these abandoned structures like this. So the idea of Helltown, I think, is really just rooted in that. And it is weird.
Yeah,
like it's an odd thing to be walking around and suddenly there's someone's home just sitting in the middle of the woods, grown up. So we think we found the spot or the general area where our witness had her encounter. And I just wanted to mention on camera that her sighting took place relatively close to Joe Kesky's. That means we've got Rob Gardner's track that he found along the same railroad tracks. We have Joe Kesky's sighting, and then you've got our witness from 1999 who also had a sighting along the railroad tracks. One thing she pointed out that I wanted to mention is we found the barn, and apparently during that time there would have been an apple orchard up here. So that's very interesting because it might explain why they were so prevalent in this general area. But you know, how that connects to Helltown, I don't know. The legacy of this park seems to be one of abandoned houses and abandoned homes, entire villages taken from people. And yes, the park is beautiful, and I love the fact that we're preserving our wild lands, but I don't like the fact that we have taken people's property from them and claiming eminent domain and things like that. And a lot of legends grow out of places like this. There's Land Between the Lakes, who I've already mentioned. Cuyahoga Valley just kind of has that same vibe. And how much of that grows out of the fact that there are shattered dreams all over the park? There's probably some connection there. But, you know, we might never know what the exact connection is between Helltown and Sasquatch.
Cuyahoga Valley National Park doesn't fit neatly into any one box. It's beautiful, yes, but there's something else here. Something that lingers just under the surface. A mystery, or maybe a series of them, woven into the soil, the water, and the very history of the place. From strange disappearances to unexplainable howls echoing through the trees. From ghost stories and urban legends to decades of Bigfoot sightings clustered along the waterways and ridgelines, the valley has quietly built a legacy of the uncanny. It's not the kind of place you figure out in an afternoon. Bigfoot sightings in the park stretch back decades and tend to follow a very particular pattern. Creatures spotted along creek beds, near trailheads, or close to the Cuyahoga River itself. Researchers like Mark Maisel and Charlie Page have long believed that the water systems that carve their way through the park act as natural corridors. Quiet, winding paths that allow something large to travel undetected. These waterways also attract deer, small mammals, and other potential prey, making them ideal highways for a hungry opportunist. Even though CVNP sits squarely between two major cities, the land it protects remains remarkably wild. Dense forests, marshlands, secluded ravines, and overgrown farmland provide both cover and food in abundance. It's a place where nature still holds sway, where the line between the known and unknown blurs just enough to let something strange slip through the cracks. Maybe that's why so many of us keep coming back. To hike the trails, ride the train, or just sit by the river. Hoping, maybe, for a glimpse of something that reminds us there's still a little mystery left in the world.